the like Tao. Welcome to day 2 of our 7-day tea extravaganza. I'd just like to remind everybody that there are forums. We now have 3 forums for each day of the course. So the course is divided into heaven and earth. The heaven being the like Tao, the teachings, the context, the philosophy, etc. The earth being the practical elements of tea. And so we have a forum for heaven, we have a forum for earth, and we have a forum also for the homework, if you want to discuss the homework. And we'll be moderating these forums. So as opposed to putting your question into the live stream, which is not permanent, we suggest putting it in the forum, and that way we can all talk about it and we can answer it and work with it, and your questions will be answered. And I want to remind you to also try to stay on topic. So you have the heaven, the earth, the homework, and these are the topics we want to discuss. You can start a new thread. The discussion button's up in the right corner when you click on any of the forums, and you can start your own thread or comment on an existing thread. By staying on topic, we don't go all over scattered, and also you never know if a question you're asking might be answered in a future day. And so then at the end of the course, we'll have a miscellaneous forum, and we can use that to discuss any questions that weren't covered in the course. So starting from today, the balance of heaven and earth will be much more equal. Yesterday, we had a lot more heaven on day 1, a lot more introduction. Today, it'll be really half and half, and from now on, it'll be an hour of heaven and an hour of earth. So that means that, if you are tired of my blathering and you don't want to listen to blathering anymore, you can just skip this video to 1 hour in and get to the practical, juicy stuff if that's what you're here for. If you're here to just learn the practical stuff of tea, you can skip over my nonsense and jibber jabber. And that's one of the benefits of doing a video course. You can even put it on fast forward if you like and watch me go blah, 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 and really turn to jibber jabber. And then reach halfway. And yesterday, was a lot of jibber jabber, and you might be wondering, wow, this guy really talked a lot about listening. And if that's the case, then, I second that emotion. I second that emotion. So there's a reason for that. Ideally, the foundation of tea is not something that I can teach you. It's not a method. It's not a list of skills. It's not data. So I'm left with, we could have yesterday just sat and ran the camera for 2 hours and done an experiment, like Cage in 433, that famous piano concert where he came on stage and just sat there for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. I could have just come on and sat for 2 hours, but that wouldn't be much of a course. So I have to just do my best to point at things that can't be discussed and that aren't discussable. And that's why I use so many metaphors, and I don't speak literally, so that, again, you can see that I don't have answers, I have questions, and that my teachings aren't argumentative stances. You can disagree with them all you like, but they're not supposed to be like, hey. They're supposed to be like, hey. And then from there you go into questions. Let me wrap up yesterday and recap it very simply, and then we're going to revolve around some of these issues kind of throughout the course. So hopefully if things didn't land in this way, when they're said in another way or different metaphors used, they will start to steer you in the right direction. But let me put things very simply. If you're here to learn to drink tea, or to understand why a person drinks tea, the answer is listen. And by listen, I don't mean with the ears, I mean with the whole being. Receptivity, openness. That's what this medicine encourages and inspires in us. And that's what it has to offer, this practice. It's a practice of studentship. It's a practice of openness and listening to nature. If you're here to learn how to make tea, the foundation of making tea is a bow. If you can bow, you try now, not just the physical gesture. Gather your receptivity, your openness. Gather your heart. Gather your humility. Gather your reverence. Gather those things and bow. Now, that energy right there that you gathered, you try it one more time. That energy that you gathered, that's how you make tea. I don't care what pot, what cup, what bowls, what method, what tea, where you are in the world, a tea bag, a mug, a samovar. If you make tea with that energy, you're 90% there. And this is true actually almost of all spiritual cultivation. What I'm saying is that if you can listen and you can honor, listening and honoring are 95% of spiritual cultivation. If you can do these two things, you're there, and you have to practice. These are really what a practice is. That's the simple version of yesterday's introduction. And then I do want to revolve around one more thing we discussed yesterday, because it's going to be the launching point for today's Heaven lesson. And that is, I talked about this idea of the indigenous soul. And I don't want you to get too lost in that term. I'm using a term that maybe you're not familiar with on purpose. What I mean by indigenous soul is I mean that which is natural in us. The nature part of us, the animal part of us. We need to restore that. So let me take a similar analogy to what I used yesterday, but articulate it a bit differently. Hopefully it'll help to understand this. Let's say we found an island. It's unlikely because we've mapped most of this earth, but let's just say we found an unknown island in the Pacific. And there's a tribe of people living on it called the Oolong tribe. We're going to call them the Oolong tribe. Now this Oolong tribe represents the indigenous soul. You can remember that as I tell my little tale. Now let's say the Oolong tribe, since immemorial times, countless ages, thousands of years, they've lived on this island. And they are in a very indigenous aboriginal lifestyle. This is an undiscovered island. They haven't had contact with the rest of the world. They've been cut off. So they're still living as they have lived for thousands of years. Which means that their day begins with the sunrise and ends with the sunset. Their calendar is all based on the moon. They know how to read waves because they're an island. So they know how to read the ocean to navigate and read the stars. They know the sounds of every animal on their island. They know when birds sing in a certain way, it means a storm's coming. They know what to do when a storm. Their life is very synchronous with weather and with the seasons. They know how to grow food. They know how to make things out of bamboo and other local plant life, including their homes and etc. And then they have a rich spiritual heritage too. So they have all kinds of mythology and belief about where they come from, where their island comes from, its relationship to the stars, what happens to their people after they die. And their language is filled with all this mythopoetry. It's in the way they say hello, the way they say goodbye. It's in their songs, their rituals, the way that they dance. It's in everything. So they have all of this. And it's been passed down and refined for thousands of years, the Oolong tribe. That represents all of us. That's our indigenous soul. We all come from that, right? Now let's say the modern world comes in contact with this island, the Oolong tribe. So now the Oolong tribe is meeting 2020. And now what's going to happen? Well, it's complicated because on the one hand, there's a lot that we could offer them. Maybe 50% of babies in the Oolong tribe die of a disease that is very treatable by us, and we could save them. that's not to mention things like, showers, soap, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things that you and I take for granted and that we have. We don't really have a right to say that the Oolong tribe shouldn't have those things if they want them. That their children shouldn't be educated, that they shouldn't have computers or, all the things that we have in our daily life. Should they have them or not? It's a difficult question. Difficult question. Ultimately, it would be up to the Oolong tribe. But if the Oolong tribe chooses to more and more adopt the modern mind-made lifestyle, which is synthetic roads, synthetic clothes, synthetic food, a synthetic calendar, synthetic time of day, arbitrary clock. If they move to clock time, if they start learning English, like many peoples of the world, did you know that 1 to 2 languages on this earth are lost every year? So the cost of all that cleverness, the cost of all that will be amnesia. They will forget how to listen to birds. They will forget how to read the ocean. They will forget their mythopoetic heritage. They will forget their rituals, their rites. That's the cost. Now, this is just an analogy. There is no tribe, the Oolong. This is an analogy for you and I. Because we all come from that. We come from indigenous peoples, all of us. Celtic, Germanic, Asiatic, whatever. Native American in my case. We come from those people. And we come from a people whose life was in harmony with nature, the rising and setting of the sun, whose calendar was lunar or solar, whose life had all kinds of skills that had to do with nature, reading birds and tracking and listening to the wind and knowing when storms are coming, and rich mythopoetic heritage of connection to purpose and to our ancestors. And we've traded an amnesia of that. We've forgotten all that and traded it for all this mind-made cleverness. And so my question is, can we restore that indigenous soul? And I don't mean the culture part, the human part. I mean more what's natural in us. That's question number 1. Can we restore what's natural in us? Question number 2, can we do so without losing the positive side of our modern innovations? Of course, there's a lot of negative in some of that too. But can we do so without losing the positive stuff, like saving those babies and like computers and showers? And the third and most important question is, what would your life look like? And what would this world look like if all of that modern intellectual power was steered by our initiated selves? What would your life look like if all of the thoughts and power of your mind was steered by your indigenous soul? What would the world look like if all of our technology and infrastructure and society was steered by the indigenous soul? That's a really powerful and deep question. And that's kind of everything I was talking about. And that's where we get to with listening and bowing, listening and honoring, is restoring that soul. And so if you can listen and honor, you're really 95% there. And today I want to launch from that and talk a little bit about the shifts that starts to the big shift that starts to have its shifts. But I want to talk today just really about a big one that kind of branches off, a big shift that starts to happen in our lives when we start listening, when I start realizing I'm not my thoughts. Somebody asked in the forum, if I'm not my thoughts, then who am I? Indeed, that's the first question of yesterday. Who is asking? What a powerful question. If I'm not my thoughts, who am I? Wow. So good, that question. So rich, so juicy. Chew on it all day long. Yeah, so if we listen and we connect, we start connecting to nature, feeling that compassion, because if I connect, I realize that other is self and self is me. I am this world. What starts to happen is we start to shift into what I'm going to call a space-first living, a space-first lifestyle. Now, a space-first lifestyle has both practical and wisdom implications. Let's talk about the practical implications first. Because our society is structured completely on thought, it's all structured on content. We focus on the waves, not the sea. We are taught to fill. We are taught to fill, 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 fill. We are taught to focus exclusively on the contents, to the point that we hardly ever recognize the container, let alone value it. As you start to listen through meditation, through quiet tea drinking, you start to recognize the container, but also respect it. So your life starts to be space first, container first, then content. See, we're taught just to fill in both time and space. When someone moves into a new house and there's empty space, immediately what we start doing is, how do we fill it? What do I put there? There might be stuff all over the room, and there's just one little gap over there in the corner, and still the person walks by that little gap every day and is like, what should I put there? Same with time. I sit, and within 5 minutes, I start getting restless and bored. How do I fill this minute? What do I put in this minute? I'll look at my phone, or tap my leg, or whatever, right? Fill, 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 fill. This habit of filling constantly, of focusing completely on content, is why listening to nature is challenging. It's why meditation is challenging. Maybe you listened to the meditation instructions yesterday and you find you're trying to follow your breath, and 3 breaths in, boom, your mind's gone. Then you can 4 breaths later and boom, your mind's gone. That's why meditation is hard, is because we have habits of filling. And when we start to listen and meditate and start to recognize the container, the sea, we start to live space first, value space more. That doesn't mean we have an empty schedule and do nothing all day. It doesn't mean our house is completely stark empty. It means that we value space. And I value space over content. So if I'm going to fill an area of my home with something, it needs to fulfill a function. Absolutely, be it aesthetic or actual function, and do it really well, because the space that it's taking up is precious to me, more precious than the thing. So if it's going to take up that space, it's got to really do it well. Same with my schedule. If I'm going to fill it with something, I'd rather do nothing all day. But I can, of course, I have things to do. You do too. So I'm going to fill it with things to do. I'm going to make them worthwhile things to do. In other words, what I'm saying is that instead of running around doing all day long, trying to scramble to find the space to just be here and there wherever you can, why not first establish being and then do? Out of being comes doing. Being before doing. That's space first living. And in our practice, all focus is on space. Today's slogan is making space for meditation is the primary meditation. Within the practice itself, there's not much to do. More of our energy is about making space, especially in the beginning, coming from a content-based lifestyle, where even listening to the container is challenging. There's so much noise. Your efforts are going to be in making the time and the space to sit and be. All your focus is there. Right? I know what to do when I get to the gym. Put on headphones. And there's some science to which machine and how to work out, but mostly my effort is in getting to the gym, making the space for exercise in my daily life. So making space for meditation is the primary meditation. Doesn't matter which meditation you practice if you only do it 5 minutes a day. You got to make space. And the more you do that, the more you start living space first. So when it comes to time, schedule, when it comes to physical space, right? The space is more precious than the content. Doesn't mean no content. It just means that I value space over content, as opposed to content over space. So that's the practical implications of space first living. You can start to think about that. This happens naturally. It's not something that you have to force. As you start to listen, you automatically start valuing space. You start living space first. Right? You start being more conscious of how many, I value that space, so I'm going to put something there. It's going to be worthwhile. Right? I value that time. If I schedule something, it's going to be worthwhile. But I value the time more than what's in it, if that makes sense. Hopefully that helps. Now there's also a wisdom element to space first living. The wisdom element of space first living is about one of my favorite teachings, one of the most influential teachings in my life, which is about flooding the arena of the Tao. Flooding the arena of the Tao means not giving the mystery space to work on us. That means not allowing things to happen to us. That means not allowing all the foo-foo to come into our lives, the guides and unseen forces and whatever's out there. But it also just means practically not allowing things to happen. It means projecting ourselves where we don't belong. There's a Zen master that once said, all of a human being's and humanity's problems boil down to our inability to do nothing. All our personal problems, all of our species problems. And that's that sitting and listening and space first living. Back to our indigenous soul. It's a really helpful analogy. Indigenous peoples understood something that we've lost. Again, we traded all that indigenous soul, we traded cleverness, and cleverness at the expense of amnesia. Something they understood. You have the village, and then around the village you have a kind of like intermediate demilitarized zone. An area that is like part nature, part village. People can go, but it's also understood that nature will be in there. It's kind of both. And then outside of that, you have the wild. And the wild is taboo. You don't go there. Unless you absolutely have to. But you stay out of there. That's why our culture's still left with vestiges of this. Stories of the haunted forest that you don't go in and things like that still are around, right? Those ideas. Because there's a taboo in the wild. This is a respect for the wild. The respect for doing nothing, giving nature its space. If you have a parking lot and you want to turn it into a forest, what do? You do nothing. You leave it alone. But our content-based way of life, do, build, fill, build. Our solution is, if we want to turn the parking lot into a forest, we'll use our minds and we'll do it. But we can't do nature. We have to leave it its space. And this is what it means. Leave the Tao its space in your life. That doesn't mean the mystery, it takes up all space and you do nothing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you can't be active and pursue and build and do things. That all happens in the village or in the intermediate zone. Again, this is an analogy, right? But I'm saying that have respect for the wild and that which is wild in you. Restore that. That's part of restoring the indigenous soul. And you let nature have its space. Let it work on you. Let the mystery be involved in your life. Let the universe twirl you as much as you twirl it. Give it its space or more. What percentage of space is situational? How much I allow the mystery to guide me and how much I actively get involved. It could be in one particular case, 90% is my effort and 10% is the mystery. And it could be in another case, the opposite. 10% is my efforts and 90% I'm swept by the current of the Tao. But it always has space in my life. It always plays a role, the mystery. Now, what do we flood the arena of the Tao with? We flood what should be left alone. We flood nature, of course, with thought, but I feel like we've talked about that enough. We flood the arena of the Tao mostly with desires and fears. Let's talk briefly about each of these. We flood the arena of the Tao with our desires all the time. That's a big part of like build. Fill. Fill all time until I die. Fill every minute. Fill every nook and cranny. And even the wild, we don't respect it or leave it alone. We view it as like a place where I can go for a walk. A place where I can go be and observe. And our desires, really, if you think about it, it's about, you could say, ambition. Our usual methods for getting what we want are, frontal attack. Go get them, get the bull by the horns, brusqueness. Or like wooing and persuasion. I will persuade the world. I will persuade others to give me what I want. And so basically, usually where we're at with our desires is like, either I'm going to force advance, or I'm going to quit. I'll force advance, and if that doesn't work, I quit that project and go try to force advance somewhere else. And there's not any space for things to work out on their own. In fact, our content-based society that's all fill teaches us that nature is cruel. And if we don't grab it by the horns, we'll be cheated of our happiness if we don't go out and take it, force it. I'm not saying there's not a place for action and for doing and even hard action. But again, I'm saying that flooding the arena of the Tao means that the mystery doesn't play any role. Whereas it should always play some role, even if it's just 2%. You see? It should always be involved in what you do. This universe should be involved, and its mystery should be involved. The Tao should be involved. And when you choose that third option, of letting things work out, which is what happens when you start living a space-first lifestyle, a being-first lifestyle. When you start choosing that third option, so the first two options are force the advance or quit. And sometimes those are needed, those two approaches. But I would always include the third option of letting things work out, of trusting nature. Even when I'm forcing advance, I can still include some sauce on my sandwich of letting things work out. Even when I quit and walk away from a situation, I can include some letting things work out. And then there's other options where I just let things work out. By including letting things work out on their own in everything I do, I'm learning one of the most powerful truths of life on this planet, in this universe, which is the influence, which is learning to influence through the power of inner truth. Learning to influence the world through the power of inner truth is more valuable than the results. That's the problem with desires. The biggest problem with desires is that the moment you desire anything, anyone, anything, any experience, the moment you desire, you have just sold your independence. And that independence is more precious than whatever thing you want. The moment I start desiring, I am now susceptible to the influence of people trying to sell things to those that desire. I'm now susceptible to advertising. Even more toxic, I am susceptible now to a desire for recognition. In other words, a desire to be seen in a certain way. If I post enough Instagram photos in a certain light, people will see me in a certain way. That's toxic, that desire for recognition. And actually, it betrays, in that case, even what you're seeking, because what we really respect in someone else is when they don't want anything from us and they're not seeking our recognition, when they have inner dignity and truth and they're not trying to make us look at them in a certain way, especially when we know that way that they're asking us to look at them is not true. So that when you have desires, you sell your independence. You sell your self-reliance. And to that, I leave you with two questions. These are in the homework. Very deep, some of the most important questions in life. Why is it that the things that I want are always the things I do not have? Why do I always desire other than what is? That's first question. Second question, really important, deep question. The thing that I used to desire, when I get it or have that experience, does it fulfill me in the way that I thought it would? I'm not saying does it fulfill me or not. Sometimes you want something, you get it, and it doesn't fulfill you at all. But I'm saying even when it does fulfill you, does it fulfill you in the way that you thought it would before you had it? See, flooding the arena of the Tao with our desires when we do this, we're actually living backwards. We're living content first, not container first, not space first, but content first. And the issue with that is that you're trying to create a world that suits your vision of what you think it should be. You're scrambling around to reconstitute nature so that it's all synthetic, it's all concrete, it's all synthetic clocks, synthetic this, synthetic that, and you're trying to do that with your life. You're trying to create a vision and then working really hard with lots of ambition and drive to make that vision a reality. We do that as individuals, we do it as societies. The problem with that is that first, there's two problems. First problem is that it's super hard. I don't know about your experience, but my experience is that the harder I try to make my vision a reality, the more the universe goes other directions. Like a bunch of unruly kindergartners. And believe it or not, I was a kindergarten teacher before I was a Zen teacher. It's like, it's like, the areas of your life. You get your relationship in order, and then your career goes to hell. You get your career in order, and your relationship goes, it's really hard. And in my experience is that when I have things that are unwanted, the universe is like standing there like a chef in a dirty diner with a pot of slop. And, the universe is standing there and like, oh, you don't like that, do you? Have some more. Oh, you don't like that experience? You still don't like it? Have some more. And like getting things in order, getting the world to look the way I think it should, is a real uphill battle. That's the problem with trying to create a world that suits your vision. Flooding the arena of the Tao with your desires, not letting nature be wild, trying to domesticate your life and domesticate nature. Domesticate the Tao, not honoring that which is wild in nature and wild in you. That's the first problem. The second problem with it is that even if I do get it in order, it won't stay put. Getting things in order is an invitation for Nataji to come dance. It's an invitation for things to come apart, because that's the way things work. Right? It's like in the Oracle, in the Book of Changes, the 63rd Gua, which is Qi Qi, after completion, in which all the yin and yang lines are in perfect order. Everything's in perfect order. And yet we could say the commentary to simplify things on that hexagram is a bit of a warning, because now everything's in perfect order, great, but it's about to come undone. So now's the time also to prepare for that, prepare for the coming undone. So that's really the problem with it. And what I'm talking about with Space First Living is rather than trying to create a world that suits your vision of what you think it should be, why not create a vision of the world as it is? We're talking about acceptance. This doesn't mean being a pincushion. It means allowing the mystery to always play a role. In certain instances, that role might be 0.5%. In others, it might be 99.5%. But always let the wild play a role. Let the mystery be involved. Let the Tao be involved. Don't flood its arena with your desires. And that acceptance, actually, you think it's about it's one of the most confusing aspects of Buddhism, Taoism, Eastern thought. People think it makes you into a pincushion and you're just kind of uncaring and whatever, man. But actually, the moment you accept everything is the moment that it all becomes workable. And the moment you begin to recognize that nature can and will work things out, just as it has for you. That's the issue when you flood the arena of the Tao with your desires, your egoic desires. A big problem is your egoic desires, first of all, they're always like fix-all solutions. If I could only get this product or have this experience or get this job, it would fix everything. The ego always offers these one-time fix-all solutions. And then we start to get hypnotized by them, fixated on them. If I need to get that thing, I need to get that thing, I need to get that thing, I need that experience. And we start to have tunnel vision. And that tunnel vision prevents us from seeing all the other ways that the situation could work out. It also prevents us often from stepping back and analyzing the motives for that solution. In other words, which part of us is suggesting that outcome, that solution? Usually, the desire that we're flooding the mystery with, in this case the mystery is the future, the desire that we're projecting for ourselves into the future usually comes from some kind of childish, immature sentiment or fear-based coping mechanism, and doesn't even lead to that which is good for us. We don't really want it, in other words, which is back to the question of maybe it won't fulfill us in the way we think it would, right? When actually in nature, if you let things work out, let things work themselves out, you realize there are no failures, right? Susie has a dream job. She wants to get that job so bad. She has to get that job. Oh my God, everything's on that job. Fixated. Myopia, tunnel vision. Gotta get it. Lots of ambition, stressing herself, ruining her health, working 15-hour days all day long. Gotta get that job. It's gonna fix everything. And she doesn't. It goes to someone else. Devastated. Susie, who doesn't know what to do with herself, moves to New York. Oh, after like 3 months of moping around, she's completely failed. Everything is, right? Because when the ego offers those solutions, it often offers them with an exaggerated view of our abilities. It exaggerates what we're actually capable of, which actually encourages failure often. And so in this case, she fails, she mopes for 3 months, but then she needs a change. So this great failure in her life causes her to move to New York. Now in New York, about a year later, she meets her boyfriend, then fiance, then husband, and eventually they have 2 children. She meets an artist. She never had any interest in art before, and she starts taking painting lessons. And she's actually pretty good. She meets a Zen community and a tea community. She starts practicing tea ceremony and going and meditating with a local sangha. And 20 years later, all of these things in her life, her children, her husband, her art, and her spirituality, they are all quintessential Susie. She couldn't possibly imagine her life without these things. And yet all of these things came as a result of that so-called failure. All of these things came as a result of the mystery, because the mystery is working whether you want it to or not. So the only thing that was lacking is that she didn't understand that she could influence the world through the power of inner truth. She didn't understand to include the mystery, to allow things to happen, to let the unknown be unknown, and not project desire onto it so much. The other thing we project onto the Tao, as I said, is fear. Now there are 2 types of fear. One type of fear is a very natural fear. It's very important. It's instinctual. It's when there's a clear perceived danger. And the danger doesn't even have to be real. It just has to be perceived. And following that fear is very important. It's a very important part of who we are, right? When the grass moves, our ancestors, back in the primate days, they go up the tree when the grass moves. It doesn't matter if the grass is moving because of the wind or it's a lion. You go up the tree. It's late at night. I'm walking down the road in Barcelona and there's a bunch of dudes shouting coming down the road. I'm going to the other side of the street. They could be just really happy because their football team won. It doesn't matter. That's a perceived and clear danger. That's not the type of fear I'm talking about that we project onto the Tao and flood its arena, swamp its arena so that it can't work on us. Block it, in other words. The kind of fear I'm talking about is scheming and plotting to get certain results. It's that aggressiveness, constantly facing problems with either a frontal attack, a very brusque frontal attack, I'm going to get it, or with wooing and persuasion and trying to get things that we want. It's that kind of fear-driven, fear-based living, plotting and scheming to achieve certain results and fearing other results. And it views all issues in life as problems, and the solutions are always aggressive. The best analogy I have for this, is the way we look at nature again. We tend to, because we play the king of the heap game. As soon as you start getting involved in desiring recognition, desiring things, you're now involved in the king of the heap game. I don't know if you guys play that game where you are, but when we were a kid, we played it, especially in the autumn when there's big piles of leaves that were raked up in our yard. It's basically a game where you get on the top of the pile of leaves and everybody else tries to be on top. And your job on top is to push everybody else down and prevent them from being on top. Those are the rules of the game. And that's pretty much how we see nature. We edit the nature show. We edit the nature show down to just the moments of like kill, yeah, lion. We edit to all the competition in nature. We like that because it suits our view of life and how we're living, and that fear-based living. So let's look at it from the perspective of a farmer. A farmer's got some sheep. He's a shepherd. He's got some sheep, and there's the local wolf, and the wolf is coming and eating some of his sheep. Immediately, his response is the wolf is a problem, and the solution immediately is aggressive. Kill it. But you have to understand, in nature, in the mystery, in the Tao, the wolf is not a problem. The wolf is not a problem to the sheep. First of all, the wolf culls the herd of the sheep and keeps it at a level that it can support itself in that environment. When I was a kid growing up, there's a lot of deer where I grew up in Ohio, and there's no wolves. They've been driven off. And sometimes, we have a lot of deer that would come into our yard. My father would even set up cameras. He loves them. He feeds them. He planted all these apple trees and harvested hardly any of the apples because he liked the apples to fall on the ground and feed all the deers. And during the years when there was too many deers, you could see the news would offer rewards for hunters to kill deer, which may seem a little cruel, but actually we would see the effect of that because you look out and you see all the deer in our yard, and you can see that sadly like 80% of the children are not going to survive the winter. They're all too thin. Why? Because there's too many of them. There's not enough food in the environment. So the wolf is culling the herd of sheep. Also, another thing to understand is that the wolf, when it kills the sheep, it doesn't randomly kill sheep. It's not just, right? It kills one sheep, eats it, and then it goes and sits and licks its blood for a day or two. And it only consumes, let's say, 30-40% of the carcass. What happens to the other 70% of that dead sheep's body? Well, that becomes the food for vultures and other carrions and bugs and maggots and all kinds of, and the soil and that grows the plants and all kinds of other things. So the vulture literally can't survive without the wolf. So is the wolf a problem to the vulture? I think not. Is the wolf a problem to the maggot? Oh no. He's his best friend. And you might say, well, at least the wolf is a problem to that one sheep that is killed. Even then, things get tricky. When the wolf catches the sheep, there is certainly pain, and there is certainly suffering. But there isn't a subject. In other words, the sheep is not thinking, ow, my leg, that's my leg, let go of my leg, you're hurting me. There's just pain. And that's life, and there's nothing, I have a compassion for that. But the wolf and the sheep, in other words, because there's no I, they're literally one. This is why there's a lot of Native American stories, like where the mouse is running on the prairie, and then it feels a shadow and a coolness, and then there's a very sharp pain, and its eyes go closed, and then its eyes blink open, and the mouse is flying. The meaning of stories like this is to say that the mouse has become the hawk, that their consciousness is contiguous because they're connected. Anyway, there is competition in nature. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying things are all peachy and rosy. There is competition in nature, but that competition is balanced with cooperation. The issue is that when we flood the arena of the Tao with our fears, life becomes all competition. And this is why our cities can feel like war zones. Difficult places to live, where everybody's playing the king of the heap game and not cooperating as much as they should. So, not flooding the arena of the Tao means not projecting all our desires and fears into the world. And first of all, acceptance. Being before doing means accepting. That doesn't mean being a pincushion. I want you to know that's important. When you accept things, they actually become workable, which means your actions are more efficacious because you know you're better about working with them. It also means that because you always have three choices with any circumstance. You can force advance, you can push, drive, work hard to make it happen. You can quit and walk away, or you can let things work out. Space First Living teaches us that we can let things work out in all three cases. So even as we're forcing, we're also accepting. And we're also leaving room for the unknown to come in and work things out in ways we didn't know. Instead of being tunnel vision and not seeing things, I'm open. And then as I'm trying to push and force things to go this way, I see a new influence come over here. And because my vision's not tunnel on this goal, it's coming over here and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I can include you. And I'm open to think to the trail now turning this way. You see? I'm letting things, even as I force advance, I'm also letting things work out. And the second one, when I walk away, I do so letting things work themselves out. And the third one, I'm just completely letting things work out themselves out. But I'm always including a percentage of letting things work out, which means I'm always including the indigenous soul. I'm always including a respect for the wild in nature, a respect for the wild in my heart. I'm always including a trust in nature. I trust this universe. It's not the cruel, barren wasteland out to get me. What? It has created me out of billions of years of evolution. It has provided me with sun and water and all the food that I can eat. It gives as much as it takes. And I trust it. I trust it to work out the big things in the long run. I trust it to work out the little things. I trust it even as I'm pushing on my ambitions, on my goals. I trust it when I walk away, and I trust it. And in that way, I'm learning independence. I'm learning that I have the ability to influence this world through the power of inner truth. I'm learning that my orientation to the issue is the issue. There is no issue other than how I'm orienting towards it. And I'm learning that my orientation needs to include the mystery. We're getting near the end of our heaven part of this course. So wrapping this up, let me say to you this. You have to include a relationship to the mystery in your life. Mystery is a big part of life. If you don't want to look at mystery, I can make you look at it right now with a very real truth. My brother, my sister, very soon, you will not exist forever. Think that thought. Very soon, I will not exist forever. Not in this form, at least. Maybe not at all. That's mystery. It's very real. It's very much around us. And we have to relate to it. There are 3 ways to relate to the mystery. The first way to relate to the unknown is, we could call it the scientific approach, which is to carve off chunks. You approach the unknown and you explore it and trial and error and experiment and discover, and you basically carve more unknown into the known. You learn more about it as you explore. You decrease the unknown and increase the known. The scientific method is the best way of doing that. The second way of relating to the unknown is the mythopoetic. Unfortunately, the word myth has come to mean a lie. That's because our ancestors, in part, used myths to explain things they couldn't understand. So they explained the rain as the tears of the god Uglabu, right? And now we have the science for understanding, for carving the unknown into the known. And so those explanations aren't necessary anymore. However, that wasn't the only function of myth and rituals, because rituals and ceremonies are there to actualize the story, the myth, in the life of the human. So in essence, to use that terrible analogy, we threw the baby out with the bathwater. The myths, certainly part of their role was to explain the unexplainable. We now have a better method for explaining the unexplainable, so we don't need that myths to play that role in our life anymore. And I think a lot of people, especially in the modern rational worldview, think that's all that myths did. And so therefore myth means lie, means false. But myths didn't just do that. Myths were also a way of relating to the mystery. Through the ritual and ceremony and through the stories that are handed down, through the actualization of those stories in my life, all art comes from that. Tea ceremony, painting, music, theater, it all comes from that need in mythopoetry to connect to the archetypes that are in us, which are the archetypes projected out into the universe. What I'm talking about really, if you want me to boil this down really simply, is living with imagination, like you did when you were a child. Imagination is important in life. Nowadays, we just view imagination as entertainment. We just watch the movie to be entertained by our imagination, and that's not real. But I don't want to live in a world, I don't want to live a life without imagination. Because imagination is one of the ways that I communicate with the mystery. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. The third way of communicating with the mystery is what we talked about today, the mystic way. The I don't know mind. I don't know. And how you access this, you have to practice uselessness. A tea practice is useless. It's good for nothing. One of the most famous Zen teachers, Koro Sawaki, said, unless your Zen is good for nothing, it won't be good for anything. In other words, our life is so driven by flooding the arena of the Tao with our desires that if we fill our practice with that same habit, we'll never break that habit. If we sit down to meditate in order to get something, if we sit down to drink tea in order to get something, we're just transferring that desire from the material realm to the spiritual realm. We're just continuing that everything I want is not here, not this mind. Later there. After I get this thing, after I meditate, after I blah, blah, blah. So in other words, we have to make goallessness our goal. That sounds absurd when you say it, and it is. It's illogical, it's irrational. But when you sit down to practice it, you can do it. Trust me, you can do it. If you give it a try, you can make goallessness a goal, and that's what tea is about. That's the foundation of tea. The foundation of tea is if you want to learn to drink tea, listen, do nothing. And you don't need any method. You don't need anything. A mug, a bowl, a cup, anywhere you are, any kettle, anything anything. You just need some leaves, hot water, and a bowl, and you got all the answers to drinking tea there are in the world. You can't get anything else from me. And if you want to learn how to make tea, you just need to learn how to bow. You need to learn to make tea out of receptivity and reverence and humility and love. You fill the tea with that, it's going to be great tea. And then you're doing nothing. And in doing nothing, your Zen will be good for something. It's paradoxical, but in order to get the benefits from meditation, it has to be goalless. In other words, it has to run contrary to all our ambitions. We have to create a space-first hour, a space-first space, a space that is focused on container, not content, that isn't trying to get somewhere or fill something. And that's why we always suggest, and I suggest strongly now, that you avoid the kind of gung-ho tea. What do I mean by gung-ho tea? Well, a lot of times when we first get interested in something, especially when it does good for us, when it changes us positive, when it has a positive influence in our life, we want to immediately go share it. I want everyone to know about this tea thing. I'm going to go out and serve lots of tea to lots of people. The problem with that is, especially when you're a beginner, you have now, that is detrimental to your practice. Because you've now taken a practice that is geared towards listening, receptivity, receiving, and you've hijacked it towards filling, giving, sharing, getting recognition, connecting outwardly instead of inwardly. You should be going towards being more of a student, more listening, more opening. And do that for a long time, years, before you start wanting to share it. It was 15, 17 years before I started teaching, of practice, of receiving. You might not need that much. I'm stupid. I'm a little bit dumb and a little bit slow. You got to pardon me. It's the way I am. But I'm also a big mouth, as if you hadn't noticed, right? And that also gets in the way of this practice of listening for me. It has. But over years, what it has seeped in. And I can listen now. I can even sometimes listen as I'm talking and sharing. But avoid that gung-ho desire to turn your tea practice into something outwardly focused, like the desire to go share it with everybody. Give it to others instead of the desire to receive and sit and be. Because you're hijacking a container-based practice. You're hijacking it into a content-based life. And you're therefore missing out on all of its benefits. In other words, for your Zen to be good for anything, it has to be good for nothing. For the tea to work, it has to be useless. It has to not have a goal. If your goal is to share lots of tea with lots of people and go promote tea and outwardly, you're not going to get the real goal. I know that's paradoxical, but I hope that makes sense. And I would avoid that pitfall because it will be detrimental for you. Take the time. That could be years, months, I don't know, but take the time to just receive instead of making tea about something that you want to project outward. Because progress in tea is measured like all spirituality. It is measured by density inversely. In other words, the further you go, the less dense you are. Which means the more open you are, the more receptive, the more the Tao plays a role through you. And then when you do go to share, it will be the Tao sharing through you instead of you sharing. But you'll never get there if you hijack it and make it a content-based practice. I hope that makes sense. That concludes our heaven aspect of this teaching. Maybe some of you will have fast forward and that will all just be I don't mind. Right? Again, teachings are just invitations to explore their questions. Run with them. Now we're going to come down to earth. Deep breath. And move on to practical matters, the juice of it. So, today we're going to learn more how to make tea. I think up until now we spent a little more time on heaven just to establish the fact that you don't need any method, you don't need any knowledge. You just need a bowl and some leaves and water, and you can listen. And if you can bow, you can also make tea. Nothing, and that whole part of tea is not something I can teach. You got to find it in your heart. But now we're going to move on to some methods. Tomorrow we'll talk about why method is also important. And today we're going to start with what's called the 5 basics of all tea brewing. These are very helpful because they influence all the methods of tea brewing. Now, I can't speak for other lineages, other traditions of tea, so I don't know if the 5 basics are influential in every tea method out there, but it would seem they should be. They certainly are applicable to all the 5 brewing methods in my lineage. Actually, we have 2. We'll talk more about them maybe at the end, bowl tea and gongfu tea. And there's then 3 types of bowl tea. This course is going to be focused on bowl tea. We're thinking about maybe doing another gongfu online course later in the year. We'll see. But this is going to be focused on bowl tea. And these 5 basics apply to all of the methods. So they're very helpful. They form the foundation of the method of tea brewing in this lineage. And understanding them is very important. So we're going to learn all 5 basics now. Starting with the basic number 1. Basic number 1 is we divide the tea space in half, and everything on the right side we do with the right hand, and everything on the left side we do with the left hand. In other words, we don't cross the line. Now, every rule always has a few teeny exceptions. Some of those might come up. We'll talk about them later. But we don't cross that line. And that's really important for a lot of reasons. The first reason is that this brings my whole body into balance, which just like holding the bowl properly, some of you noticed in the forum, when I hold the bowl properly, I sit up more, I listen more. I'm more open, I'm more receptive. both more receptive to what the tea is doing inside of me and more receptive to outside, right? Nature's always speaking, and tea helps us understand what she's saying. In the same way, when I use both hands, when I involve my whole body in a balanced way, I'm more receptive and upright and balanced and yin and yang and in harmony with nature, right? It's very challenging, and I think you can see this, to make tea like this for someone, for this to be upright, for this tea to come from an upright mind, for it to reach an upright mind, right? So there's a very off balance when we're like really leaning over. Also, because again, the foundation of tea brewing is reverence and respect. Yeah. If I have a group of people and I reach over this way, I'm turning my back to some of my guests. If I reach over this way, I'm turning my back to guests over here. So I'm turning my back to people. I'm also off balance because often especially if you're right-handed, left-handed people are better in tea. So if you're a lefty, you're better at tea from the get. Good for you. But right-handed people especially, we tend to be really off balance, and that our right hand is really strong and our left hand is very weak. And when you do everything with your right hand, right, and your left hand becomes like some kind of evolutionary vestige, like the tailbone, you become off balance. You lose center. It's just like using two hands to hold the bowl. Keeping everything with both hands means everything is centered and balanced always. Always held in the center, right? And staying in that centered, upright way really does change the mindfulness of the practice of preparing tea, and it changes the way that the tea then relates to us because it's prepared in that way. There's also a practical reason for doing this. I'm going to put a pot here to demonstrate. The practical reason for doing this is once you do start working with a pot, which we'll get to later in this course, in almost 30 years of tea brewing, I can say with confidence that the number one reason that I have seen teaware get broken, number one by far, is somebody reaching across. Because you can see when I reach across like this pot right here is in my blind spot. When I come back, especially if I have sleeves, whoom, dang, 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 dang. Easy to knock over. This is like that blind spot in the mirror of your car, right? It causes a lot of accidents. When I reach over like this, do you see? I can't see my teaware and I can hit it. So this is a practical reason for doing this. But the main reason is to be energetically balanced in the center of the tea space and connected to it. This means we have to hand things to ourselves. So you hand things to yourself to get it over here, right? An important example of this is bowls. So my bowls are down here on the left, and I want to get them over here on the right. In order to hand the bowls, there's technique. The skill of handing the bowls is best for me in that kindergarten song. I told you I was a kindergarten teacher. The eensy weensy spider. The eensy weensy spider went up the water spout. Right, that one. So if you can do eensy weensy spider song, you can hand the bowl to yourself, because this is how we hand the bowl to ourselves. It's Tai Chi, right? So I hand the bowl to my other hand in that way, right? I'm exaggerating a little bit. Why? Because in order to get it over here, I need this hand on top as the yang. So I have to flip to get it over here. I have to flip to get it over here. I got to get this hand on top. It's the eensy weensy spider, see? I'm using my thumb to pivot the bowl. I'm using my thumb just like the eensy weensy spider. I'm using my thumb to get the bowl to my other hand. Do you see? So that I can grab it. Yeah? Now, these 5 basics, actually, in a more advanced version, they all have an A, B, C, D. So there's actually 4 other parts to each basic. We're not going to cover all 4, but I will throw out some extra ones, and in this case as well. I'm going to throw out the A. The A for dividing the space in half and doing everything with the right hand, everything with the left hand, is that I always say it in a, I guess, semi-facetious way. Imagine there's a button right here on your tea space, your chashi, and that button, it stays down for 15 seconds, and then it pops up. And if it pops up, we all explode, like cartoon style. Not like we're all dead, but like our faces are black and our hair is all up, and we have smoke coming out of our ears. Cartoon style explosion, not modern movie style explosion. Okay, so you don't want that cartoon explosion to happen, so you got to keep that button depressed. In other words, what I'm saying is that we always keep our hands on the T-space throughout the whole ceremony. Very rarely you will be using both hands, like in handing the bowl to myself like I was just doing, right? But mostly in tea we're just using one hand. And so when I'm using that just one hand, this hand is here, touching the T-space, right? So when I'm using two hands, I do, but then immediately a hand comes back. So this is really how I hand the bowl to myself. And when I'm not using any hand, they're both here. But I'm always touching the chashi. When I grab a kettle, for example, one hand is here. If you're brewing on the floor, same thing. The hand is down on the tea space. And in this way, I'm always connected. Always connected. I never leave my guests. I never leave the space. There's a lot more mindfulness. There's a lot more uprightness. There's a lot more listening. There's a lot more connection, right? You can maybe see it if you watch me, right? I'm going to grab the kettle now. So I could grab the kettle two ways. Here's the first way I grab this kettle. Here's the putting it back like that. Grab it, and I put it back. Okay? Now, if you can, notice what's different. The difference, I don't know if you can see it on camera. It might be a difference that's just inside of me. I can certainly feel it, but maybe you can see it when I do it like this. And I put it down like this. And I pick it up. I can certainly feel the difference of this. I'm connected to the space. I'm connected to the table. I'm connected to my guests. I haven't left, right? Versus this. And this. All right? So I keep my hands always touching the tea space, the presence, the moment. I'm always touching, right? And I'm always centered. And I'm using both hands to make my tea, right? And everything on this side, right side, everything on this. So I'm never pouring tea like this. Right, you can see, maybe you can, I can certainly feel that, but again, I don't know if you can see it. Maybe you can see it on camera when I do this. Right, not so nice. And then things can break, clack. So, and we don't want things to explode. So we're always connected to the tea space, always holding that button down. This is the first basic. Second basic. A lot of circular movements in tea, right? A lot of circular movements, and all circular movements to the right hand, counterclockwise. All circular movements to the left hand, clockwise, right? Okay, or if it's easier for you, towards the center. This has a lot to do with the ergonomics of my body. This is in all Tai Chi, and you know, I'm sitting here in part because I grew up practicing martial arts, Wing Chun. So in Wing Chun, we know that if you are inside, you win. Right? If whoever's inside, the straightest, route to any between 2 points is a line. If you're on the inside, you win. So you want to get the opponent's hands apart, right? And then, right? So this is a part of the way my body moves. This is awkward. My elbows kind of clack. It works when you're swimming because you're in a medium, but this is a lot more smooth. Smooth movements towards the center. And towards the center obviously makes sense, right? Circular movements towards the center, coming towards the center, right? And there are some exceptions. Again, every rule has some exceptions. There are some movements that go out too, but mostly it's coming towards the center for almost everything, with some exceptions. The exceptions are mostly ceremonial. Now, everything in a tea ceremony, everything that has practical significance also has ceremonial significance. So every time there's a practical reason for doing something, there's also a ceremonial reason for doing it. But there are a few things that have ceremonial significance and no practical significance. So they're there just for ceremonial reasons. They're not there for practical reasons. But everything that's there for practical reason also has a ceremonial reason. So this circular movements towards the center just makes everything smoother. So when pouring, etc., moving always towards the center, towards the center, towards the center, towards the center. That's the second basic. The third basic is to do with the kettle. Very important. And that is that the kettle should be in the offhand. Kettle should be in the offhand. I'm right-handed, so my kettle's on my left side. If you're left-handed, then your kettle's on the right side, but kettle's in the offhand. Chances are If you're new to tea, you haven't been doing this because it's natural. The kettle is heavy, so it's natural to want to use your strong hand to do it, to pour with it. There's a lot of issues with that. First, again, then we get into that thing where the left hand is, the offhand is an evolutionary vestige. We're not using it. We're not using two hands. We're all off balance, which lacks reverence and uprightness, and we're doing everything, with one hand. And by having the heaviest element in the offhand, you're actually even bringing more balance to that, because the offhand is usually weaker, and you're forcing it to do something stronger. Because you're already off balance this way, you're kind of up making things right. But that's not the main reason. The main reason actually might not affect you too much in the beginning of your tea journey, but it will become very, very, very important later on. And the problem is that if you have a habit already of using your strong hand with the kettle and you don't break it as soon as possible, later on when this issue does become very important, you'll now have to overcome that habit. Remember, we talked about being a master of the seeds. Small things, deal with them when they're small, not when they grow up, right? So habits are more difficult to deal with when they're more entrenched, obviously. So, and the reason that it will become very important later on is because of fluency. And that's, especially in Gong Fu tea, but anytime there's a teapot, you see, so I have to grab the teapot with my strong hand. We kind of know that intuitively, and there's lots of reasons for that. So if I have the kettle in the strong hand, right? I come up, I fill my pot, right? And then I have to set the kettle down to pick the pot up. So my tea is moving like a jalopy, like a jiguli down the road, right? It's moving in stops and starts. So, filling, setting down, picking up the pot, you see? But if the kettle's in my offhand, I can do it all in one motion. I can pick up in one motion, do you see? I can fill, it's much more fluent. And why that will be important is because, let me tell you, later on, especially when you start practicing Gong Fu tea, that few seconds, especially in the early steepings, like steeping number 2 or 3 of a really fine cliff tea, that 2 or 3 seconds that you have to use to set the kettle down before you can pick the pot up will result in a completely different tea liquor. If you don't believe me, do an experiment with the second or third steeping of a yen cha, where you can use 2 hands or 2 different people, and you have a timer with 2 people, and one of you picks up and one of you picks up 2 seconds later. In those early steepings, you will see that extra 2 seconds of steeping creates a very different liquor. So those few seconds of having to set the kettle down will become important for your ability to prepare certain types of tea in certain ways. It will become very practical, in other words. So for that main reason of fluency, but there's a lot of energy in that fluency too, in the using of 2 hands, right? And getting everything to flow without stopping, right? In the preparation, that's really quite powerful. And so having the kettle in the offhand is the third basic, right? I'll give you the A for this one too. The A for this one is the way to hold the kettle. So we hold the kettle with our finger riding down the handle. That's really important. Sometimes people want to hold the kettle because it's heavy in the back like this, with their thumb on top like this. If you put your thumb on top like this, when you pour, you really only have on and off. On, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. And your circular motion is also limited, right? When you ride your index finger down the kettle, right, you have a lot more control over the amount of pour, right? And you also have a lot more control in a circular way. You can move and pour tea around. You can control the flow. You can control the way that the tea pours, the amount that pours, etc., etc. A lot more when you're holding it with your finger down the handle. So that's the third basic. The fourth and fifth basic go internal. The fourth basic is never ever times 10 ever. So never ever 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 pick up the kettle until your heart is still. The time when the water is boiling has always been a time for meditation. We know that because there's all kinds of Chinese poems that have the line in there that the wind soughing the pines summoned me back from my meditation. And to ancient Chinese, the sound of the kettle boiling is like the wind soughing the pines. So what that's saying is that the kettle started to boil, it brought me back from my meditation, and it's now time to prepare tea. It has metaphoric meanings as well too, but what I mean, why 10 evers? I'm being a little facetious. What I'm saying is that if you make a habit right now, a very strong habit, every steeping for the rest of my life, every single steeping number 1, steeping number 27 of every tea, no matter where, no matter how, no matter who I'm brewing tea for, no matter what type of tea I'm preparing, Gong Fu bowl tea, no matter what, just make it a habit. The more you do it, the more it will be unconscious and it'll just happen on its own and it'll be easy. You have to practice it though. Make a strong determination, 10 evers. Just make a strong determination that no matter what, every steeping, before I lift the kettle, I will take a moment. Nothing good will come of picking this, because this is what starts the process of preparing tea. Nothing good is going to come from picking this up and going, Janos, and like, talking or any gesture or movement. Always still my heart before I pick up the kettle every single time. Even if I'm already super relaxed. It's like bowl 4, we're in the middle of a bowl ceremony. I'm super calm, I'm super relaxed. I still take a moment. You could say a mantra, shake a feather, do a spell. I'm a simple man, I just breathe. Take a breath. Take a breath or two. I feel the connection. If I'm using a pot, I feel the connection between the pot and the kettle, which means the water and the tea, especially if they've already met. Make sure the channel's clear. Open myself up a little more, relax a little more. One of the things I used to love about my teacher is when he was given meditation instructions, occasionally, it was hard for me not to burst out laughing. It's one of those things I had to stifle sometimes my laughter. But sometimes in the middle of meditation sessions, he's teaching people how to meditate and he would say, relax. Relax more. And I always loved that second, relax more, after a 3 count. So you can always relax more, even if you're super relaxed. You can always take a breath before you pick up the kettle, because that's when the tea preparing starts. So always relax yourself, slow down, calm down, right? Talking just results in broken teaware. It's actually a traditional Chinese custom. It's not so much in use today, but actually it was considered kind of rude to talk while you were preparing tea. So even in a conversational tea setting, a casual tea setting, the one who's preparing tea, as they're preparing, they would be quiet. The other people could continue talking, but they would prepare tea in quiet, and then they would hand out the tea, and then they could rejoin the conversation, because it was said that if you talk, your words will get in the tea. It's just a bit like why we cook the dinner before our guests come over. Because if I cook after you come over, unless I have a partner or somebody else to help me, but if I cook when you come over, I either ignore you and make good food, or I make crummy food because I'm trying to entertain my guests as I cook, and I'm not concentrating on my cooking. It's one of the reasons we bow at the beginning of a tea session. A bow is a bow. We've talked about bows a lot. If you can bow, you can make tea. If you can gasho, you can practice Zen. 90% there. But one of the reasons I bow at the beginning of a ceremony is to excuse myself from my guests. I'm saying to my guests, excuse me as I take my attention away from you and honor you by making the best possible tea I can for you. So, taking the time to calm down before I pick up every kettle means there'll be more stillness in my tea. And that stillness will translate then to those that drink it, or to myself. And it makes tea more of a practice. And you can just, if you practice this really determinedly for months or even a year, it'll be there the rest of your life. Just every steeping. Don't let a single steeping go by where you don't take a moment before you pick up the kettle to take a breath or do whatever you need to do to calm down. Within reason. Don't sit there for 3 hours and then nobody gets tea and your guest says, hey, where's my tea? And you're like, well, hey, my teacher said I can't pick up the kettle till my heart's still and I'm having a bad day. I mean, within reason. The idea is just every single steeping, take the time to calm yourself down. The fifth basic is to stay with the tea. Stay with the tea. So there's no point in calming down before you pick up the kettle if you then are going to pick up the kettle and go, Janos, and lose that peace that you just had, right? So stay with the tea means as soon as I pick up the kettle, I stay with the tea, fully present, all of myself there, all of my samadhi, right? This is called Dien cha in Chinese. Dien means single-pointed samadhi tea. Fully focused. All of myself, my whole being is here with the tea, fully in what I'm doing, fully present, fully focused, nowhere to penetrate, right? The Shogun Hideyoshi said of the great Zen and tea teacher Rikyo, one of the greatest of all time, he said that his tea is like, he's like the greatest of all swordsmen. There's nowhere to penetrate. When Rikyo makes tea, there's nowhere to penetrate because he's so fully there. So like the greatest swordsman, there's nowhere to penetrate Rikyo's tea. So there's a lot of stories about this. I'll tell you one if you want. But the fully present, until I hand the bowl to the guest. When I hand the bowl to the guest, then I can let go of the tea. And if it's a casual session, again, I can return to conversation. But having those gaps in conversation will also make conversation better because communication, as we talked about yesterday, is a lot more about listening than it is about talking. So having breaks where you stop and focus on the tea, give people tea, they drink their tea, means we also talk about more important things because our talking is coming out of stillness, out of quiet, out of pauses. So stay with the tea, fully stay with the tea. There's a small story that articulates this. There's a tea master, old man. He's been practicing tea, 50 years, teaching it 30, has many students, very respected. And like many tea people, he is very simple, right? As an ordinary person grows in knowledge and power and spirit, they become a sage. As a sage grows in knowledge and spirit and power, they become an ordinary person. So he starts dressing more like an ordinary person, not like a noble. And in Japan in those days, society is very stratified. A noble, a samurai, literally had the right to kill a peasant for any reason. So when the nobles come, the peasants all, bow their head. You don't even want to look at them wrong. And so this old tea master is kind of dressed like a simple person because he likes that style of clothing. It's not a statement. He's not trying to get recognition for it or anything. He's just humble. And he's walking through the market. And there's a big crowd, and he starts getting jostled, and he's doing his best, but there's not much he can do. And he's kind of pushed and bam, smacks into a very young, proud samurai. And that high school phenomena happens. A circle's created. Oh, fight, fight, fight kind of thing. And there's the young samurai and the old man, and the old man bows and apologizes, but the young samurai is not having it because his pride's been touched. So he's like, you, me, duel, 5 a.m. tomorrow by the river. I'm going to kill you. And it's, then his honor is reestablished in the eyes of all those people. So the old tea master has a student who's a general and a great samurai, a great warrior. He's fought in countless battles. He's a very accomplished martial artist. So he goes over to his house and he says, my friend, this is what happened, explains to him, yada, yada. And the general, the samurai, says, the battle's tomorrow, so I can't really train you. There's no training. But I'm going to do what I can. They say that you can't repay a teacher in 10,000 lifetimes. So with all that I am, I will help you. And he goes into the other room and he comes back and he says, this sword is my soul. It's been in my family for centuries. And it has slain many enemies. It is bathed in blood. And it is a very powerful weapon. And I'll give it to you. And all I can say to you, Master, is that I've drunk tea with you now for decades. And go tomorrow and draw this sword and hold it the way that you hold the tea scoop. And that's the best advice I can offer you. So gratefully, the master accepts the sword and accepts his fate and goes the next morning at 5 a.m. in full acceptance of that, what we spoke about in our heaven today, in full acceptance of things are going to work out. Nature will do what it does. If this is my day to die, it's my day to die. It's a good day to die. I'm awake, I'm present. So after a good morning of tea and meditation, he's ready to leave this earth. And he goes to that place calmly, allowing the Tao to work, allowing the mystery to unfold in the way that it will. And he draws that sword the way that he has picked up the chashaku, the tea scoop, for decades. He picks it up with all of himself. He stays with the tea, there's 5 basic, and he draws that sword with this. And that young samurai, that young proud samurai, he has trained enough in martial arts. He's been training 3 or 4 years. He has trained enough. He has the eye to see that there's nowhere to penetrate. There's no way through this defense. He knows what that looks like. Even though in this case it's actually kind of false. But he knows what that mind looks like. He knows what that feels like enough to sense that he's been defeated, and he sheathes his sword and bows down and begs forgiveness from the old man, not realizing that the old man is, at least he assumes in that moment, a much greater sword master than he had originally thought when he bumped into him in the market the day before. He says, "Excuse me, old man, I'm so sorry," and lets him go. So he was saved by his inability to penetrate and by his allowing of things to work out. So that deals with that 5th basic. These 5 basics are there in all tea brewing, right? In all things, you can utilize them. Today, I also want to cover the first brewing method that we're going to learn in this course, which is leaves in a bowl tea ceremony. We're going to learn about it now. I'm going to teach it to you. We're also going to be posting a PDF of the magazine that has a photographic and text guide of this ceremony and this method, and a video. So you'll be able to see the movements from many different angles and practice. This is the most simple ceremony and very easy to do. Doesn't require too many things to remember or skills. So it's a great place for you to start. And this is how you can start preparing tea on your own. Again, though the majority of what we experience and get from tea comes from the listening and doing nothing. It doesn't matter mug, pot, bowl, or method or no method. So if you can bow, you can make tea. If you can listen, you can drink tea. And if you can listen and honor, you're 95% of the way in spiritual cultivation. Because you're focused on container, not content. And so the contents that you need will come. So all you need for this is some bowls, some tea, and a kettle. That's all you need for this ceremony. We start usually with the bowls off to the side. In this case, I have them on my left side. At this point, it doesn't matter to you which side they're on. That there is some teachings around that, but they're situational, and I don't want to complicate this. So there's no real hard rule. Let's just start today. They're in my offhand, okay? And let's say I have 2 guests. We're going to make it simple, so I have 2 guests. So again, I'm going to start with a bow, in part to excuse myself from them and focus on making tea, putting all myself like that, master, all my focus. There's nowhere to penetrate. Nowhere to penetrate. All myself is on the tea, so I'm going to bow. But in that bow, I'm also reminding myself to fill myself with receptivity, with humility, with respect and love, and to prepare tea from that heart mind. Only one word in Chinese, Xin, heart mind. So I bow. And I'm going to keep my hand here, remembering that button. I don't want us to cartoon explode, right? So I'm going to grab each bowl. And the first bowl, I'm going this way to this way, right? So the first bowl, I'm going to need to switch hands. So I'm doing that eensy-weensy spider. And I'm going to turn the bowl 3 times. This is one of those very few things. Most everything in tea ceremony, there's my hand, most everything in tea ceremony has a practical significance and ceremonial significance. The turning of the bowl is one of the things that only has ceremonial significance. It doesn't have a practical function. And you'll notice it's not towards the center, so it's also an exception to the to the rule of circular movements towards the center because I'm spinning it towards my guest. The ceremonial reason for this is to connect the tea ceremony to the orbits of all the Earth and the cosmos. It's bringing the cosmos into the ceremony and the ceremony into the cosmos. Also, it's a little bit of a salute to past tea ceremonies because there was a time when monks sat around and they weren't like us. They weren't so abundant to have many bowls, a bowl for each person. They had to share one bowl. And so they would send that one bowl around. And they too would turn it. The reason that they would turn it practically is to offer the next person the part of the bowl that your lips weren't on. So you drink from here and then you turn it, in some cases even wipe, and offer them the next part of the bowl. But also then the bowl was like orbiting the community, like the Earth going around the sun, and it was also like orbiting, spinning, and it was also going around the way the Earth's going around the sun. So it was orbiting like the Earth and going around the sun, so it was connecting to all that, and the galaxies are spinning, everything's spinning. Spinning in cycles. Changes are all cycles. So we're connecting to that ceremonial significance by turning the bowls. So grabbing it, and I'm turning, and after I've done the eensy weensy spider, right, I'm turning and I'm setting it out. Now, the middle bowl could go either way. I could use either hand. I'm going to continue with my right hand, but I could also do it with my left hand, right? And now I'm on the left side, right? So I bring this bowl out, and I'm using this hand on the bottom, and I'm spinning it out again, but now it's going the other way out towards this guest, and I'm going to put it down. My hands are now here. Hands always here. Okay? Then I have some tea in a little dish. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move this to this hand. Again, it's going in the center, so it could really go either hand. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to spin this also. Same reason, that ceremonial significance. And I'm going to bring it out, set it down carefully, everything done mindfully, right? It's very helpful if you fluff the leaves. Why? Then the little bits go to the bottom, and we only put the big leaves in the tea. Usually for this type of brewing, we don't want to use like a compressed tea or a tea with little bits. We want to use either like a ball tea, rarely, because ball oolongs are really better prepared gong fu, but you can use them to great effect, or a striped tea like this one we call striped, this shape, which is long, twisted shape. Is the best for this type of brewing. So when I fluff the tea just a little bit, it lets the tea bits sink to the bottom, and I can put the leaves in. The amount of tea, it's different for every occasion and who your guests are, and the tea itself. We never serve a tea that we're unfamiliar with to guests, unless that's the purpose of the tea gathering. In other words, if Giannis calls me on the phone, he's like, hey, I got this new tea, you want to try it? And I'm like, yeah, sure, come over, let's try it. Then that's the function of that tea ceremony. But otherwise, I would never prepare a tea I'm unfamiliar with for guests. I'm always become familiar with the tea before you prepare it for guests so that you can prepare it well. Just like you don't most likely cook an experimental dish when you have important guests over. You cook your trusted casserole that you've made many, many times and you know you can make it really well. You might make an experimental dish if your good buddy's coming over, but not if it's an important guest, right? So you get to know how to make that dish before they come over. So know your tea first, and then you know the amount. I'm not going to put leaves in every bowl because I don't want to waste the tea right now. So, but same thing, right hand for here, right? And then I'm going to switch for left hand for this bowl, right? Right, and then the tea goes back. When I put it back, I'm going to spin it again 3 times, but I'm going to spin it the other way, away from the guests, outward, right? So I'm spinning it this way, 2, 3, as it comes back. Everything in threes. If you want to know why 3, it's the cosmic. If you want 3, you can choose any number of 3s. The Trimurti, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Any of the 3s you want, they're all over the place. They've always been there since the beginning. There's a lot in that. We could talk for hours about 3s. So 3 spins back. So I have my tea out. Now, the other thing that you need to prepare tea this way is a genshui. A genshui is a wastewater container. It could be a genshui. It could also just be a bowl, a salad bowl even, doesn't matter. Cereal bowl, just like these could be rice bowls, right? So I have my genshui here. And again, as I bring the genshui out, I'm going to turn it 1, 2, 3, and set it down carefully, right? So This is for washing the bowls. So I got lost a little bit. I'm sorry. So we're going to do this actually before we put the tea in. Scratch what I did earlier. Sorry. I apologize for that. I got a little bit sidetracked. That's what happens when you talk, when you try to prepare tea. It's a good lesson for you. You mess things up. So I've brought the bowls out, and I'm going to wash them first before I put the tea in. I'm sorry. So I bring the bowls out. Okay, we can start again. I apologize for my mistake. Bring the bowls out. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, and then I bring out the jian shui, and then I'm going to fill them with water. The washing of the bowls. The washing of the bowls also has practical and ceremonial significance. The practical significance, of course, is to clean things and keep them clean. And the ceremonial significance is to like wash off the dust of the world. In Chinese, going back since ancient times, the dust of the world is, it's like, you know, cities were dusty. They didn't have paved roads. So it became a metaphor for like worldly things. So to become a monk in Chinese, we call it shaking off the dust. And monks live in the mountains. There's no dust in the world. So it's kind of like a temporary ordination. And in most ceremonies all over the world, we use water to purify before we start a ceremony, to purify all the stuff in our mind, right? Like you can see when you bring mind to tea, you make mistakes like I just did. And it's good that I made that for you. It's just another lesson. First of all, that I make tons of mistakes every day, and second of all, that too much talking and mind and thinking while trying to prepare tea doesn't really jive. So we're washing all that off. We're all in the tea space. We're all monks and nuns. We're all ordained. We're all cleaned of our worldly stuff, and we arrive fresh for the tea. So just so you don't get confused because of my mistake, I'm sorry. We're gonna bring the bowls out. Yeah, and then we're going to bring the jian shui out, and then I'm going to fill the bowls with water, and now I'm going to wash them. Washing the bowls happens with the offhand is kind of like a bicycle fork. So it doesn't move. One of the biggest, I think, problems that people have in learning how to prepare tea in this way, following the ceremony, in terms of washing the bowl, is they try to move both hands. And it's kind of like, patting your head and rubbing your belly. It's kind of like what just happened to me, trying to talk while doing something. You space something, you forget something. It's a little bit hard to do. So it's really helpful if you remember that your offhand doesn't move. It's like a fork of a bicycle. It doesn't move. And then the strong hand moves. So like this. We're going to hold it at like a 45-degree angle. The goal is to get the water to come over the rim of the bowl and clean the inside of the bowl, obviously, but also clean the outside. And the practical gesture of respect to our guests in cleaning I could clean the terra before my guests come, but out of respect for my guests, I clean in front of them, because this is part of the ceremony of the cleaning of all of our spirits as we sit down for tea. So you want the water to come over the edge and clean the part that their mouth is going to touch, the inside and the outside. So for each bowl that we clean, we're going to bring it to the center, to the jian shui, back to the center, and back to the table. This is very important because later on when we start using a teapot, the jian shui will be off on the side of the offhand. And one principle in tea, you could call it a sixth basic, if you will. It actually is one of the ABCDs in one of the basics, so it's not really a sixth basic. But one principle in tea is that we don't ever, again, there are some small exceptions, like all rules, but we don't ever cross the vertical space of one teaware with another, right? The ceremonial significance of this is like that tea, we don't break that teaware's connection to heaven. But the practical reason is that, teaware gets broken. If I bring the bowl over the teapot, I can hit the top of the teapot, right? So basically what I'm saying is that by bringing the bowl to the center and to the jian shui and back to the center and back down, I'm going around the pot to the jian shui, washing, coming back and going down. This also allows me, the second reason for coming to the center, to the Gen Shui, back to the center, back down, the second reason for doing this is that it allows me to switch hands if I need to, which is there even when I'm not using a pot like we're doing today. This reason is there, it's important, right? So when I grab this bowl, I don't need to change hands to wash it. I come here, now remember, see, this hand's not moving and this hand is spinning towards myself. We always rinse the wastewater towards ourselves. We don't throw wastewater towards our guest. The whole ceremony is built on reverence and respect. So we don't waste water towards the guest, the wastewater comes towards us. So like that, now to the center, now down. This middle bowl could go either way. So I'm going to continue. I don't need to change hands. So I come here. Offhand is a bicycle fork. Doesn't move, doesn't change. And spinning towards myself, spinning towards myself, spinning towards myself. Now, it's good to shake out the last of the water. We do this with a Buddha's palm, right? We do this by, once again, just like holding the bowl. Foundation, guide, right? Guide, foundation to set the bowl down, right? In the same way, foundation, guide is turning the bowl towards us, right? Switch, this becomes foundation, this becomes guide, and bonk, 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 right? 3 times. That's just like in holding the bowl, right? When we pick it up, the offhand is yin, and the strong hand is yang, and then we come in, this becomes yang, and this guy becomes yin. In the same way, we pick it up, we're washing, this is yin, it's guiding, this is yang, it's holding, right? And then when it comes time to get the last of the water out, I'm switching, this is now yang, and this is now yin, 1, 2, 3, right? Back to the center, setting it down. Now you can see the other reason for coming to the center, the practical reason. Coming to the center is also the heart, right? That's the ceremonial reason. Now, for this one, I need to switch hands. That's another reason for coming to center, not just going around the pot later on. So coming to center with this left hand, I now need to switch hands, do you see? So I need to do that eensy weensy spider so that I can get to the place where this is holding the foundation and I'm cleaning towards myself, towards myself, towards myself, and then I switch, and 1, 2, 3, and then back to the center so I can switch hands again to set it down, right? Okay? Now the Gen Shui is going to come out. Again, we're going to turn 3 times out, outward to take it away, right? Inward when it comes in, outward when it goes out, okay? And now, right, sorry for my blunder, sorry for the confusion. Again, we're going to have the this whole ceremony, we're going to have it in a magazine form, and we'll have a video. I'm sorry I blundered, but I'm happy I did. And it, you know, it is itself a very important lesson learned from my blunder. The lesson is, right, don't talk while you're making tea. Make sure you're fully mindful. Sometimes it's hard to teach talk, especially when you're a big mouth and you get invested and then you make mistakes. So I cleaned the bowls off. Right, I've rinsed the bowls and rinsed our spirits. Everybody's fresh and clean, like the holy water when you come in the church or the mosque or temple or whatever. We're cleaned and ready for a ceremony. And now in comes the tea. Now comes the tea. We're going to switch hands, spin, 1, 2, 3. In comes the tea. And just like before, I'm going to fluff it. Right? I'm going to fluff it. And then I'm going to put a few leaves in each one. And I'm familiar with the tea, so I know how much I'm going to put. I'm also familiar with my guests. Are they new to tea? Maybe brew a little lighter. Are they seasoned tea people? Maybe they want it a little stronger. What time of day, etc. And then out goes the tea. Right? 1, 2, 3, away. Okay. Now in comes the water. And again, kettle in the offhand, and we're bringing the water in. Our goal is to make the leaves spin. We want them to spin like 45 degrees. The reason for this spinning is that if I just pour the water, the leaves will float, and they will take a really long time to start steeping, and they'll also get in people's mouth. And then in later steepings, we want them to spin because the leaves are stuck to the bottom of the bowl when they're wet. So we want to lift them up, get them in the water. The way to make the leaves spin is to pour at an angle, kind of like this, on the far side of the bowl, away from you. Eventually you'll know, it's different for every bowl and kettle, but eventually you'll know that spot and you'll be able to boom, hit it because you'll know your bowls, you'll know your kettle. But when you're finding it, you can start with a smaller stream and you'll hunt around for that spot. And then when you find it, push on the gas and there it goes, right? And if you got your index finger riding down the kettle, you got a lot more control of the kettle, both circular and in the flow, and you can do that and find that place. And the more you find that place, the better. And the leaves will spin. Now the leaves have spun. Okay? Now, just for the first steeping, just for the first bowl, before we hand it off to any of our guests, we're going to bring it to our heart and we're going to look them in the eyes, give some eye contact to this guest and smile. This has to be a real smile. We talked about gestures yesterday, like a real bow versus a fake one. This isn't a model smile. It's not like, it has to be, smile from your heart and look that person in the eyes, eye contact, right? And then we're going to give them the bowl. When we give the bowl, this is another exception to the spinning rule. I'm going to open it. So this is spinning this way instead of towards the center, right? And the reason for that is the practical reason. I'm going to offer my guest the part of the bowl that my hand is not on. Right? I'm going to offer them the part of the bowl that my hand's not on, right? And the same for over here. So I got this guest. I'm coming here to this hand, right? This center one could go either way, but I know my guest's over here on the left, so I'm going to grab it with this hand so that I can set it down that way on that side, and I'm going to give them eye contact, smile, and I'm going to put the bowl down, and I'm going to open it up so that I'm offering them the part that my hand's not on. I'm gesturing for them to drink. They often, if they're new to tea, they don't know, so I gesture for them to drink every steeping. That eye contact, we only do the first steeping. It's very important. Silence can be heavy for people coming from a content-rich culture, a content-rich life, not space-first living, but fill. And so when they sit down, sitting in silence, sitting quiet is really heavy and hard, and it feels like solemn and uncomfortable. And that smile welcomes people. It works. It's magical. It can make the difference between your friend Joe sitting there for the whole hour, like looking around, kind of bored, tapping his leg, wondering what we're doing and how long this is going to go on, to that same Joe sitting there with a big smile on his face in complete peace. Literally, it can make that difference. I've seen it. Not in all cases, but it really helps to have that smile, that connection, that I see you. It's a good practice for you too, to make that eye contact and smile from your heart, a real smile. Not a smile on your face, not a face smile, a heart smile, connection, heart to heart, and nothing intense. No, not like, it should be light, that smile. It should be light and joyous and beautiful, not like I'm staring you down or I'm like lightning bolt transmitting something or something. No Shakti Pat. This is just a light, joyous smile. Welcome, be happy, enjoy your tea smile. Okay, then the people drink their bowls, and each round the bowls are going to come back, right? So that we don't forget whose bowls are whose. Very, very, very easy way to do it. A very, very easy way to do it is that if you want, you just choose a way. You choose a method, right? You choose a way of doing it. The way that I've done it, so my bowls are here. This is Connor's. This is Janos's. The way that I'm doing I always do it for me is I always do left to right. I bring them back left to right, so towards my strong hand, and my bowl is last. Of course, your own bowl is last. And that way I never mess up the order. So in this case, it's 3, so I'm probably not going to mess up the order, but I do like this, and then I always and then I do mine. In that first steeping, when I hand them out, I could hand them out in any direction. In fact, it's very common for us to switch the direction we hand them off every steeping. So that first steeping, I gave Janos his first, and then I gave Connor's. This next steeping, I might give Connor's his first, and then give Janos. And then the third steeping, I give Janos first, and I give Connor. So we can switch that back and forth, but I always collect them the same way. I do towards my strong hand and myself last. And then I never mess up the order. I know whose bowls are whose, right? So don't. And then we just refill. Again, we want the leaves to spin. And then I'm going to hand them out in the opposite direction. Here to the right. Again, I open my hand, offer the part of my bowl, the bowl that my hand's not on, to everybody, and we drink. And you can drink as many bowls as you want. Only that first bowl do you make eye contact. After that, leave your guests alone. You leave them in silence. You can just focus on the tea, keeping your hands touching the tea space. And so just do like that. And Bowls come, bowls go, bowls come. That's the breath of the tea ceremony. We are separate individuals. We are connected. We are one. This is one gathering, one ceremony. Yet we are all on our own trip. We are all own special, unique individuals. Yet we all share the same heart, that namaste place, and so on and so on. After you're done, I would suggest at least 3 bowls, but could be 27. Ceremonies that don't conclude are not good, so you need a conclusion to the ceremony. You need a good conclusion. And a conclusion, in this case, has always traditionally been water, because actually even in like casual tea sessions in Chinese society, you couldn't tell a guest to leave. So saying go is forbidden. Just like even today in Japan, if you go to a restaurant, the waiter can't say no, which confuses sometimes foreigners. You say, "Can I have some ketchup?" And they're like, "Yes." And then you see them 5 minutes later and you're like, "How about that ketchup?" And they're like, "Yes." But it's just because they can't say no, they don't have any ketchup. But so you can't tell someone to leave. So one of the casual ways of saying like our meeting is over is when the person would serve water, right? I've proven this countless times. Even somebody who is brand new to tea, they've never brewed tea in their life, ever. They're brand new to tea. If you serve a bowl of water at the end, they will know the tea ceremony's over. It's just obvious, right? And it also like washes away. It's kind of like a mandala, a sand mandala. We build it and then the ceremony comes apart. If you don't end ceremonial space, if it doesn't wrap itself up, then it lingers in an uncomfortable way. It's like you get up and you leave and you've got to go pick up your kids and make dinner, but you're still kind of in ceremonial space and things are a bit wonky. So we want to wrap it up. We want to conclude it, come full circle. And so we're going to serve a bowl of water. That presents a problem for this particular method of tea brewing, because there's leaves in the bowl. So how do you prepare water, right? And so you have to get the leaves out. So on that last steeping, I bring in the bowls. I bring in all the bowls, right? Mine is last, and they're all here. And so what I'm going to do then is bring the genshui back, and again 3 turns, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to bring my genshui back, right? And what I'm going to do is you'll get really good at this. You don't actually even need to touch the bowl. So I'm bringing this to the center again, right? So I can switch hands. I come to the genshui. I'm going to take my fingers and just scoop the leaves out. You'll get really good at this, so you can do it without even touching the bowl, and in one go. You're just flick and the bowls and the leaves are out, and to the center in here, and flick and the leaves are out, and to the center in here, and flick and the leaves are out. However, now I've put my hand in people's tea bowls. So of course I need to wash the tea bowls again. So just like we did at the beginning, I'm going to add some water into each bowl, right? I'm going to add some water into each bowl, and then I'm going to wash mine last. So I'm going to come to the center again and again. Bicycle fork, this hand is not moving. It's stationary and straight. Don't curl your fingers. Don't try and do things with both hands. Straight like a bicycle fork, and this hand moves it, right? And then this hand switches to the foundation, right? As I come back here to switch hands, get this to the foundation and set it down. I'm going to wash each of the bowls, right? Washing each of the bowls. I'm not washing that center one because it's got leaves in it, and I'll drink it after we're done. So then I can put my genshui back, again, turn it 3 times away and put it back. And then I'm going to bring out the water, and here's where I just add the water. Flum, flum, flum. Right? And then I hand out that bowl of water to everybody, right? That last bowl of water, and then they drink their water. After they've drunk their water, again, I bring the bowls, empty bowls, back to the center, and then that is when I bow again, and the ceremony is completed. So just to run through it all very quickly, especially since I gorfed it up, let's just very quickly run through it all, right? We bow, yeah. We bring out the bowls, turning 1, 2, 3, incy wincy spider to get to the other side. We bring out the bowls, right? Then we bring out the genshui, spinning towards the center, right? And then we put some water in the bowls, and then we're going to wash each bowl, coming to the center, to the genshui. Wash our bowl last. So starting here to the center, to the genshui. This hand's the bicycle fork, turning, turning, turning. Then this grabs, and 1, 2, 3. This is now the guide. 1, 2, 3 to the center and setting down. Then to the center, then one, then turning, turning, turning. You know you've gone all the way around the bowl when you feel the wetness on your thumb, so that you've rinsed the whole bowl, right? And then 1, 2, 3, and then back, and then my bowl last, and then wash, do, 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 and then doom, and also that doop, 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 3 times. Then the Jen Shui, 1, 2, 3, out. Then in comes the tea, 1, 2, 3, out comes the tea, fluff the tea, right? A few leaves in each bowl. We know how many leaves because we know this tea well. Yeah, and then out goes the tea, dung, 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 dung. And the hand's always staying here, right? And then the kettle, and then we're gonna make the leaves spin, choo, 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 right? And then first bowl, we're gonna grab, bring to our heart, make eye contact, and hand it out and open it. So we offer the part our hand's not on, open it, eye contact, offer a part our hand's not on, and however many guests, eye contact, open it, the part our hand's not on. I don't pick up my bowl until everybody picks up their bowl. I often gesture because people don't know when to start drinking if they're not familiar with tea. So gesture, they all pick up their bowls, then I pick up mine. We drink, drink, drink. Then the bowls come. I'm going to gather them the same way every time towards my offhand, bringing them back, right? My bowl last. Again, I fill, making the bowls spin, making the leaves spin, 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 spin. And this time I hand them out, no eye contact. Just give it. And I can switch the hand, I can switch the direction. So the first time I gave them out this way, second time I go this way. Don't worry if you forget that switching. Just, try your best to go this way sometimes and then this way the next time. Bowls come back, bowls go in, bowls come back. It's time to conclude. When it's time to conclude, the bowls are in. I bring the Jen Shui out again 3 times, set it down, and I'm gonna grab each bowl and scoop the leaves out, scoop the leaves out, scoop the leaves out, right? Using this hand to scoop on this side, this hand to scoop on this side. Then I'm gonna fill them with water, and I'm gonna wash them one more time towards the center. Shung, 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 shake, 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 set, and then towards the center and set it down. Same with when we're scooping. We come to the center here, scoop it out, to the center here, scoop it out, to the center here, scoop it out, and then same with washing, to the center, wash, and then 1, 2, 3, wash, 1, 2, 3, wash, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to fill each bowl with water. I'm going to hand out the bowl of water. Everybody drinks their water, and then I bring the bowls back in, and there's the final bow. That's the ceremony. We're going to have a PDF version of it up, and we're going to also have a video to show you how to go through this whole ceremony and do so very well, better than I did today, hopefully. This is the day 2 homework. Some questions to contemplate. Do I recognize and respect space? Why are the things I desire always the things I do not have? Do the things experience I get fulfill me in the way that I thought they would before getting them? Some possible exercises. Write down some areas of your life that are too full, where there should be space. Areas that are full where there should be space. Could be in your home, right? That's 2, actually. Look around your home. Is it design space first? Does it encourage space first living? What changes could be made in your schedule, in your home, in your life to encourage space first living? Number 3, continue to follow the meditation instructions we offered yesterday. Try to sit an hour in the morning and the evening if possible. Drink tea, do a tea session for 1 hour a day. You could continue to listen to nature as we did yesterday and practice this first ceremony. Look at the magazine, has the guide in it with text and photographs. Watch the video. On the forum, we have discussions, right? The heaven discussion will be about space first living and flooding the arena of the Tao. And the practical will be about the 5 basics of tea and this tea ceremony if you have any questions. And the slogan for today, I already said, is making space for meditation is the primary meditation. That's the slogan for today. It's been a really good class. I hope that you learned a lot and that there's a lot of questions and opportunities for you to learn and grow and practice. Try practicing this method. Again, we're going to have a video so you'll be able to go through it step by step and start to practice it. It will get easier. My advice, which I demonstrated to you quite viscerally, is stay focused. Don't talk while you're doing it or you'll mess up the steps, right? But if you stay focused, you can keep the steps all organized in your space and mind. I thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow for day 3 of this tea extravaganza. super excited, so thankful, so grateful to have this opportunity to sit and share my experience, strength, and hope, and to share my questions for you to contemplate and continue and hopefully empower you to change your life and the lives of those you love.